with Bishop Dale C. Bronner.
And I pray that his glory shall fill the earth in an incredible, incredible way, so that it becomes undeniable and irrefutable that God alone is God. I'm just telling you, he has a way of making his presence known, and one of the things is that when man thinks that he's figured it out, God has a way of throwing a monkey wrench in the program, discombobulating it, our plans. We don't ever know exactly how things are going to turn out. We can plan them. The Bible says, Proverbs 16:9, a man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. You can plan to go one way, and the Lord will direct your steps another way. Things don't always go out the way that you planned them to happen. So God's an awesome, awesome God, and we just yield ourselves to him and say, God, you know, I don't know it all. I don't claim to know it all, but I know the one who does, who is omniscient, who is good, who is faithful. God knows exactly where you will wind up. He's not in doubt about it. He is confident and sure of your destiny. That's why he said, I know the plans. I don't think them. I don't hope that they'll work out. God says, I know the plans that I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. The Lord our God is an absolute, awesome, awesome, awesome God. And there are times that I am convinced that God will step into the affairs of man, and he will manipulate circumstances, back you in a corner where you don't have any other choice but to be still and see that I'm God. I'm in control. You don't rule this. God will put you in a place. And every now and then, I really feel so privileged in my relationship with God. One of the greatest things that I take joy in my own personal relationship and walk with God is my ability to be able to hear his voice, to have a sensitivity, to have God to sometimes make known his ways to me. You know, we saw in just the beginning part of this year some different things in our weather patterns that we had not been used to seeing. And I don't know about you, but when certain things happen that seem out of the ordinary, maybe you don't question things, but there's always a question in my spirit. And I was sitting before the Lord, and I said to the Lord, Lord, what do these things mean? What meaneth these things? And all that I can tell you, I took my Bible and I said, Lord, you knew this stuff that would happen in this year way back yonder. I said, there's nothing new to you. And when Atlanta had snow like I had never seen it happen in this year, can I tell you what God said to me? You want to know? And if you don't want to know now, I'll just move right on. I mean, I know who, I just want. And I said, God, what do these things mean? God made known his ways unto Moses, his acts unto the children of Israel. The children of Israel just saw what happened. But when God talked to Moses on the backside of the mountain, God explained to him why it happened. It's not enough. Something on the inside of me doesn't just want to look and see what has happened. I have a question behind what's happened to say, Lord, what is this all about? I will never forget the word of the Lord that was whispered in my ear as I looked out of my window and saw snow, heavy snow for Atlanta, and that stopped the whole Northeast and the Midwest And I said, Lord, what do these things mean? Because creation is groaning. And I can tell you, just as surely as I have ever heard the voice of the Lord, I heard God direct me of things that's happening this year. God says, it's not new to me. I saw it years ago, and I spoke about it. And I said, talk to me, Master. And I heard his voice more clearly than I'd ever heard it, speaking to me from the 37th chapter of the book of Job. I'm not going to talk about that tonight, but I just want you to see the relevancy of God in our life. In Job chapter 37, he spoke 2 verses to me. And here's what they said, verse 6 and 7. For he says to the snow, fall on the earth, likewise to the gentle rain and the heavy rain of his strength. And he seals the hand of every man, that all men may know his work. That God, when he seals the hand of every man, God means that he will stop every man's hand. Folks that were workaholics that used to go to work under any and every circumstance, God said, I'll make it where they won't even be able to get in. I'm going to seal the hand of man. I'm going to institute a divine Sabbath where my people will slow down and stop, that they will be still and know that I am God. He seals the hand of every man, that all men may know his work. When you know the work, it really helps us to stop and know the author of the work. But that's all that he had to do, was just say to the snow, fall on the earth, and likewise to the gentle rain. God has a purpose in everything that he does. Don't ever think that it's just by happenstance. It's by design that comes from an incredible, incredible God. Well, if you would, turn in your Bibles, Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6. And beginning with verse 6, Proverbs 6:6. Go to the ant, you sluggard, and consider her ways, and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer, and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. I'm talking from the subject, changing your trajectory. How to make the rest of your life better. How to make the rest of your life better. See, the best part of your life comes when you leave this life. I mean, God reserves the best for later. When you work for the Lord as a soldier in the army of the Lord down here on this earth, his retirement package is out of this world. It really is. But I want you to see here that if you're on a certain trajectory of doing things a certain way right now, the Spirit of God is in the process of shifting us in so many areas and so many realms of life. But notice he says, go to the ant, you sluggard. A sluggard is a lazy person. And consider her ways and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, doesn't need anybody to tell him to do this, but she provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. And so they don't wait until something happens. They do it ahead of time. They are ahead of the curve of what is going to happen. And so it's telling us, listen, go and study the ant and be wise, because you know the season that you're in now is not going to last forever. And he was telling them, you got to start doing something in your current season that will prepare you for the coming season. Because the season that you're in right now will not last forever. There are certain things that you have to do while you can do it. Your season of childbearing years will pass after a certain period of time. And you have to do what you're called to do in the season. You know, we bring forth our fruit in our season. It has to happen in your season. And so if you're running behind schedule because you are still operating in the season and consuming stuff in this season that is designed to be consumed in the next season, it means that you've got to change your trajectory. Because if you are still having on winter clothes while it's hot, you will look like you have lost your mind. You've seen people who've gone through traumatic events and something has happened, their minds have snapped, and in the heat of the summer, they're pushing around a shopping cart with an overcoat on. And you realize that this person is out of season. And we realize their insanity because they are operating in the wrong season. They are dressed for the wrong season. But whenever you're in a season of transition and change, as we are, this is not merely a word for word of faith. This is a word for the world. The world is in transition. The world is experiencing major systemic change. Is coming. Systemic change. You don't really change anything until a system is changed. God's doing systemic changes in various places because you haven't changed a thing until you've changed the system. It'll keep on running the same. The faces will change, but when a system is running something, the system is a thing that locks a tradition, a routine, a certain pattern and way of life and doing things. But we are right now in the midst of a season of transition and change. And whenever you are in a season of transition and change, you need divine guidance and godly wisdom. You really do. You need divine guidance and godly wisdom. Now, let me help you to differentiate transition from change because they are not the same. I want to help you to differentiate transition from change. Transition is the emotional, relational, financial, and psychological processing of change. I want you to hear that very carefully. Transition is the emotional, relational, financial, psychological processing of change. This, whenever you go through a change in your life, it is the transition that gets us. You really have to prepare yourself for transition, not the change itself. The thing that wipes people out is that they did not have sufficient transitional planning. It's the transition of your emotions that you go through, the relational things that you go through, the financial things, and the psychological processing of change. Stress comes either from too little change or too much change. If you're in a situation where something needs to change and nothing is changing, you can get stressed out because I'm tired of dealing with this same old mess. And the stress of not having enough change stresses you out. Anybody know what I'm talking about? And then when there is too much change that is happening, like Afghanistan, they got these new computers. As soon as I got used to this one, you know, I just hate sometimes having to switch telephones and learn a whole new system of operating, or how you do this thing and how do you do that one. It's sometimes it's just too much, and you don't change my telephone and the computer at the same time. It's just too much. It's too much. And you have to learn a brand new system of doing things once you had learned things the old way. If you've ever rearranged your kitchen and taken your glasses and cups and saucers from one cabinet and then put your plates in that cabinet, you'll be surprised how many times you'll go back to that same cabinet, because we are such creatures of habit. And it's the transition, it's the emotional, the relational, the financial, and the psychological processing of the change. And so people are most receptive to God when they are under stress or transition. They are sensitive to God when they are under stress or transition. Now, transitions are internal. Transitions are internal. This is the stuff that's happening on the inside. How am I dealing with this emotionally, relationally, financially, psychologically? These are internal things. Transitions are internal. Change, on the other hand, is an external event. Change is an external event. I mean, like death. If you have the death of a loved one, that's an external event. A job loss, a bankruptcy, divorce, marriage, birth. All of these events. These are external events. These are issues of change. Change is usually the result of a decision. It's usually the result of a decision. Not all change, but much change is the result of a decision. What I want you to understand is it is rare that change itself causes the problem. It's rare that change itself causes the problem. Typically, the culprit is a lack of transitional planning. That's the culprit. It is a lack of transitional planning because we don't always process change well. We don't process change well. That's why in our government, when they change something, they don't change it immediately. If they want to really do a change, they will phase it in over maybe 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. They phase the change in. It makes it more palatable. You will be surprised. Anything that you need to turn around, if you turn it slowly enough, people will not even realize that they are turning. And you can get people ever so subtly to be turning. And here's one reason why you have to be able to change your trajectory. It's a very tricky thing. If I'm aiming at a target and I am 1 millimeter off the place that I'm aiming, miles down the road, I'm not just a millimeter off from the target, I am miles off from the target. Are you listening to me? And that's why in our Christian doctrine, we have to have stewards in the faith who understand the things that are constants that should never change, because if you get off base from your Christian philosophy in the name of being contemporary and relevant, you can be miles off from the target of what God intends and wants to see happen in the earth. And so if you turn people gradually enough, just a little bit, just a leaven leavens the whole lump. Just a little leaven. Who went to a church, and when he went to the church, the podium was way over on one side of the church. And so he immediately came that Sunday as a new pastor and moved the podium right in the center of the church. One of the deacons said, "Excuse me, brother pastor. No. The podium belongs over here. It belongs over here." And he had to take it back over there. He had to take the podium back over off center, way over on the right side of the church. And that's where he had to preach from that week. He had an idea in his mind. He came in the next week and he moved the podium over 1 inch. And he went right ahead and preached, and the folks didn't say anything. And the next week when he came in, he pushed it over another inch. He kept doing that until the podium was the church and nobody ever mentioned it. And it just shows you how when change is processed over time, you see, when they moved it all at once, it didn't give them sufficient to deal with the transition of seeing things differently. It didn't give them enough time, to mentally prepare themselves for that. I don't know why it was such a big deal, but Something that may not be a big deal to you may be a huge deal to someone else. And so help them in the emotional, relational, financial, and psychological processing of the change. When you do it slowly enough, it does not become traumatic to the person. That is one of the reasons that if you have a medical issue and if you ever have to have surgery, surgery is radical. It is radical. It traumatizes your body to be cut into and anesthetized, and then when your feelings come back, what they did in a moment of time that happened so traumatically, it puts your body in shock when you're coming back into the reality of realizing that feel like I've been in a war, and all of a sudden you went in and you submitted yourself to something, and now you can barely walk the next day because it was traumatic and it was radical in your life. When you use natural methods, they are very genteel. Very genteel. Now, I do realize that there are emergencies and you need radical help because you're in serious, serious trouble. If you get it the natural way, it's very, very gentle. And you may not be able to bear the of it if you're in enough pain. And you might need radical help. So I do understand that. But the problem is that it traumatizes you in such a way you didn't have an opportunity to prepare yourself emotionally from that, mentally from that, financially from that. I mean, it is devastating. It is the transition, not merely the change, but it is the transition of trying to get used to something that is different. Transition, change. Are you seeing the difference between transition and change? They're two separate animals. So, there are many things that can send you immediately into transition and change. I want to share some of them with you. Getting married for the first time can send you into change. This requires a major shift in your priorities in many areas of your life. I mean, getting married, things will change. You have to have an emotional adjustment and a financial adjustment. You were used to what you wanted to buy when you wanted to buy it. Now you got to check with somebody. Because this is not just about you any longer. So getting married, especially for the first time, this requires a major shift in priorities in many areas of your life. Getting married. Anybody married here? Anybody here married? Some of you all are still in shock right now. You're still trying to recover. You're trying to say, what happened to me? Here's another thing, getting a divorce, especially when children are involved. This can require another major set of transition, just getting a divorce. Did I ever mention to you about a couple? And husband's 94, the woman's 92. And they finally at an attorney's office seeking a divorce. And the woman is saying, I have put up with your mess. As long as I could put up with your mess, I just can't take it another day. And the attorney asked them, why did you wait so long after you've been married for more than 72 years? Why did you wait until this time in your life to divorce? And the man said, my wife insisted that we wait until all our children were dead. Trust me, getting a divorce, especially when you have children, can require another major set of transitions. Major transition. Here's another thing, the death of a spouse. Unexpected or not. Unexpected or not. Major transition. It often requires that a person change many aspects of his or her life. You got the death of a spouse, a very traumatizing event. And it is the transition, not merely the death itself, but it is the transition, the emotional, the financial, the psychological, all of these different things of processing that change. Your life is turned upside down. It is not just about going to the funeral home and picking out a nice casket and then getting a suit and doing the funeral program. That's the simplest part of the process. The difficult part of the process comes when all of the calls have ceased and nobody's paying visits to the house anymore. And now you're having to wake up because you heard something, and this is something your spouse used to do. And now they're no longer there to do you, and you're going through the transition of processing the emotional things of this change that has happened in your life. Is that making any sense to you? Here's another thing, the birth of children and the entry into the family life. That requires huge transition. Where you could just pick up and do what you wanted to do. You have children, now it costs money to have children.
Thank you for watching Power for Living with Bishop Dale C. Bronner. Until next time, God bless you.